Welcome to another deep dive, and this time we're going dip into Adam Grant's Give and Take.
Awesome.
So we're going to unpack some fascinating insights, I think, into how these different reciprocity styles, givers and takers and matchers, can impact success.
For sure.
And, that age-old question, do nice guys finish last? Well, we're gonna try to find out. And maybe discover a way to be successful and generous, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that's really interesting about Grant's approach is that he doesn't just label people.
Right.
He really dives into the behaviors behind these styles.
Yeah.
So, givers consistently go above and beyond, offering help without expecting anything back.
Right.
Takers are really focused on what they can get from others. And matchers kind of operate on that tit-for-tat basis.
Yeah.
They value fairness and balance.
I see. So it's not just about a personality type. It's more about the actions and the interactions.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. But, it is easy to assume that givers are pushovers.
Right.
Always getting taken advantage of.
Right.
But Grant uses the story about a venture capitalist named David Hornick to kind of flip that assumption on its head.
Yeah.
Hornick actually lost a deal because the entrepreneur was worried that he'd be too supportive.
I love that story.
It's so interesting.
It really is. It challenges our assumptions about success, I think.
Yeah.
The entrepreneur Danny Shader, he was just so used to this cutthroat startup world that he couldn't fathom genuine support without an ulterior motive.
Right.
Like, why would you be nice to me if you weren't trying to get something from me?
Right.
So he ended up going with, the tougher investor.
Yeah.
Thinking that he needed that push, that he needed that kind of, tough love to succeed.
Yeah.
And so, while givers might face these unique challenges, it doesn't necessarily mean they finish last.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's a relief. Does Grant offer any examples of givers actually rising to the top?
Absolutely. There are a ton of examples in the book, but one that really stood out to me was Abraham Lincoln.
Oh, interesting.
So when Lincoln was forming his cabinet, he invited his biggest rivals to join him.
Wow.
And he understood that in order to lead effectively, he needed the best minds, even if they hadn't always agreed with him.
Right.
And this willingness to prioritize the collective good, I think, really helped him build this incredibly resilient team.
Yeah.
That navigated some really challenging times.
Yeah.
It's kind of this idea that, sometimes surrounding yourself with diverse and even opposing viewpoints can lead to stronger and more creative solutions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think there's a lesson there for all of us.
Yeah, that's a great example. Are there other examples like that of givers finding success?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Grant introduces this guy, Adam Rifkin, who's a software developer who has built this incredible network through just genuine generosity.
Wow.
He's constantly connecting people and offering advice and helping others, like without any strings attached.
Wow.
And he ended up, with more LinkedIn connections to Fortune's most powerful people than anyone else.
That's amazing. It really shows how, generosity can open doors that you never even imagined, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But we heard earlier that givers can struggle with productivity.
Right.
So how does that fit with, Rifkin's success?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it gets at the heart of what makes effective giving work.
Okay.
So Grant cites a study of engineers. And initially, the givers in this study were less productive.
Yeah.
Because they spent so much time helping others.
Right.
But here's the key. When you look at how often they help, the most productive engineers were those who gave often and gave more than they received.
Ah, so it's not just about being a giver, it's about being a prolific giver.
Exactly.
Okay.
By consistently giving, these engineers built up this reservoir of trust and goodwill.
Yeah.
Which meant they were more likely to receive help when they needed it.
Yeah.
It was this kind of strategic approach to building a network of reciprocity that ultimately made them more effective.
Okay. That makes sense.
And I think what's important for you here is, understanding that giving, when done right, can be an investment.
Yeah.
It's about building those relationships and that trust, which can pay off in unexpected ways.
This totally changes how I think about success.
Yeah.
It's not just about what you achieve on your own, it's about how you contribute to the success of others.
For sure.
So how does this giver-taker dynamic play out in more creative fields?
Well, so Grant contrasts the collaborative styles of this Simpsons writer, George Meyer, who's like a classic giver,
Okay.
and Frank Lloyd Wright, the architect, who I think it's safe to say leaned more toward the taker side.
Yeah.
So Meyer was known for contributing wherever needed, even taking on like the less glamorous tasks.
Right.
He put the good of the show above his ego. And, The Simpsons, it became one of the most successful shows ever.
That's amazing.
It just shows how when you prioritize the collective good, it can lead to some really remarkable results.
Yeah. What about Frank Lloyd Wright? Did his approach lead to a similar kind of success?
Well, Wright was brilliant, no doubt.
Yeah.
But his taker tendencies often alienated, like collaborators.
Right.
He struggled to share credit and acknowledge contributions.
Yeah.
Or even give his team the resources they needed to succeed.
Huh.
And, a lot of his, most talented apprentices ended up quitting, just frustrated by his, self-serving approach.
I see.
It's kind of a cautionary tale,
Yeah.
Even with the immense talent, a taker's approach can really limit the potential of the entire team.
It's a good reminder that even the most talented individuals need a supportive network to achieve their full potential. I'm curious about how this plays out in, scientific discoveries where recognition and credit can be, so important.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Grant uses this story of Jonas Salk and the polio vaccine. Salk is hailed as the guy who developed this life-saving vaccine.
Right.
But when he announced the breakthrough, he failed to acknowledge, his collaborators.
Oh, right.
Took all the credit.
Right.
And it really had this lasting impact on his relationships and his legacy.
Yeah.
It shows how failing to recognize contributions can damage trust and, limit future collaborations.
That's a tough lesson.
It is.
But it underscores the importance of, giving credit where credit is due.
Totally.
How do we avoid that trap?
Yeah.
How do we make sure we're recognizing, appreciating the contributions of others?
It starts with, perspective taking, stepping outside our own, preferences and understanding what others might want or need.
Yeah.
Being attuned to the needs of others and making a conscious effort to see the world through their eyes.
Right.
Even small gestures of recognition can go a long way in building that trust and strengthening those relationships.
So it's not just about being nice, it's about being thoughtful and considerate in our interactions.
Exactly, yeah. And I think this leads to this really fascinating concept that Grant calls the power of powerless communication.
Powerless communication. That seems counterintuitive. Wouldn't you want to project, strength and confidence to be influential?
Yeah, you'd think so, right?
Yeah.
But Grant actually argues that sometimes the opposite is true. And he shares this story of Dave Walton, a lawyer with a stutter.
A lawyer with a stutter. That's interesting.
I know, right?
Yeah. How did that work out for him?
Well, so his stutter actually made him more relatable and human. Jurors saw his vulnerability and connected with him on this deeper level. They admired his courage in overcoming this challenge.
Yeah.
And it ultimately enhanced his credibility.
So sometimes our perceived weaknesses can actually become strengths.
Yeah. Think about how this applies to you, right?
Yeah.
Embracing vulnerability can make you more authentic and,
Yeah.
Help you create deeper connections with others.
It's like that saying, perfection is the enemy of good.
Totally.
Our imperfections can make us more authentic and persuasive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think this idea of embracing vulnerability extends beyond just speech.
Okay.
Grant argues that asking questions and talking tentatively,
Yeah.
even seeking advice, can be these surprisingly effective ways to gain influence.
I can see that. If you come in with all the answers, people are less likely to feel heard or respected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's research that shows that, asking questions actually leads to more self-persuasion.
Oh, interesting.
So, if you ask someone about their intentions to do something positive, they're actually more likely to do it.
Really?
Yeah. It's about kind of guiding people to their own conclusions rather than imposing your views on them.
That's powerful. I'm already thinking of ways I could ask more questions.
Yeah.
And encourage others to share their perspectives.
It can really change the dynamic of a conversation.
Yeah.
And it can be particularly effective in situations like, sales or negotiations.
Oh, interesting. Do you have any examples of that? Of, powerless communication working in those contexts?
Yeah, there's this great example of Bill Grumbles, who was sent to open an HBO sales office, way back when HBO was still a relatively unknown brand.
Right.
And Grumbles had no sales experience.
Oh,
he just did what came naturally to him as a giver.
Yeah.
He asked questions.
Okay.
He genuinely wanted to understand his customers' needs and interests. And, while other salespeople were struggling to bring in like one contract a month, Grumbles was landing a contract a week.
Wow.
It was incredible.
So it wasn't about, slick sales tactics or pushing a product. It was about building relationships and trust through genuine curiosity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, when it comes to persuasion, Grant highlights this guy, Don Lane, who was this advertising executive known for his, gentle approach.
Okay.
He presented ideas tentatively without pushing for credit.
Right.
And this made him a favorite among creative teams who saw him as a collaborator, not someone who was trying to, steamroll them.
That resonates with me.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, how important psychological safety is.
Totally.
Creating an environment where people feel comfortable sharing ideas, taking risks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when it comes to negotiation, Grant shares this story of Annie, who's a research scientist who needed to continue her MBA program after her company offered her a transfer.
Right.
And instead of being demanding, she went to her boss and she asked for advice.
That sounds risky.
Yeah.
Would that have backfired?
It might have. But Annie was a genuine giver, and her boss knew that.
Okay.
And by asking for advice, Annie actually gained valuable information.
Oh.
She found out that the company jet traveled between her two key locations.
Oh.
Something that hadn't been mentioned before.
Wow. So by being vulnerable, she opened up this new possibility that wouldn't have been available if she had just made demands.
Right.
It seems like this approach requires a delicate balance of, being assertive about your needs while also being open to input and guidance from others.
Yeah. It's a fine line. But, research shows that advice seeking actually has a lot of benefits. It helps us learn. It encourages perspective taking. It can even be like a subtle form of flattery.
Right.
Who doesn't like to feel like their opinion is valued?
Yeah.
That's true.
This has given me a lot to think about.
Yeah.
So we've seen how giving and this idea of powerless communication can be surprisingly effective.
Yeah.
But it raises this important question. Can givers be too giving?
Right.
Where's the line between being generous and, burning out?
That's where we get into the distinction between selfless givers and otherish givers.
Okay.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
So, selfless givers constantly prioritize others' needs, often to the point of exhaustion.
Right.
They kind of give without boundaries.
Yeah.
And end up feeling depleted and resentful.
Makes sense.
Otherish givers, though,
Okay.
find a balance between their own needs and their generosity.
Right.
They're strategic.
Okay.
They're ensuring that their giving is sustainable.
So you're saying it's not selfish to take care of yourself?
No, not at all.
Okay.
In fact, it's essential if you want to make a real and lasting impact.
Right.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly.
Grant shares this compelling example of Conry Callahan, who's a Teach for America teacher,
Okay.
working at this really challenging high school in Philadelphia. And, she was pouring all her energy into her students, working nights and weekends.
Right. Burning the candle at both ends.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've definitely felt that way in my own life.
Oh, yeah.
Pushing myself too hard and ending up exhausted and less effective.
It's so common,
Yeah.
especially for people who are naturally givers.
Right.
But instead of scaling back, she did something kind of counterintuitive.
What's that?
She started volunteering more.
Wait, hold on. How does that help with burnout?
Right. You'd think it would make things worse.
Yeah, doing more would just add to the stress.
But it wasn't just about the quantity, though. It was the way she gave.
Okay. How so?
Conry started focusing on activities where she could see the impact of her efforts more directly.
I see.
So she became a mentor for other TFA teachers.
Okay.
And she started this mentoring program for high school students.
Uh-huh.
And she kind of chunked her giving.
Chumped her giving.
Yeah, she dedicated specific blocks of time to these activities.
Okay.
Which made it feel more manageable and rewarding.
So she created a positive feedback loop where her giving was energizing her rather than draining her.
Exactly.
That's a great reminder that we can design our giving in a way that fuels us rather than depletes us.
For sure.
I'm wondering if there's a biological basis for this. Do we know why giving can sometimes feel so good?
There might be.
Yeah.
Grant introduces this really fascinating concept called tend and befriend.
Tend and befriend.
Yeah, and he cites research suggesting that when we're stressed, helping others can actually be a way to regulate our own emotions.
Oh,
And build resilience.
So even though we often think of giving as something we do for others,
Right.
it can have profound benefits for ourselves as well.
Exactly. It's like this win-win.
Yeah.
Where everyone benefits.
We've talked a lot about givers.
Yeah.
What about the takers?
Right. The takers.
Are they doomed to fail?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Grant points out that takers can be successful in the short term.
Yeah.
Especially in competitive environments. But their success is often fleeting. Because they burn bridges and alienate people along the way.
It's like that saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
I love that.
Yeah, building genuine relationships is ultimately what sustains success over the long term.
Absolutely.
So that's where creating a culture of giving becomes so important.
Totally.
Grant uses the example of Free Cycle.
Yeah.
That online community where people give away things they no longer need.
Right.
It seems like Free Cycle would attract mostly givers.
Yeah, you would think so.
But would takers even bother with something like that?
Well, it's a convenient way to get rid of unwanted stuff.
Right.
But research shows that even takers become more generous when they're part of a system that encourages giving.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So it's not just about individual personality.
Right.
It's also about the systems and norms we create.
Exactly.
Do you have any other examples of this?
Yeah, Grant also highlights the reciprocity ring, which is this structured exercise where people make requests and offer help. And again, you see takers stepping up and contributing in ways they wouldn't normally.
So if we create environments that make it easy and rewarding to give, we can actually shift the balance of reciprocity.
It's powerful stuff.
That has huge implications for building more collaborative and supportive communities.
Absolutely.
It's not about forcing people to be generous.
Right.
It's about creating systems and structures that nurture a spirit of giving.
Totally.
This brings up a question that has always fascinated me. Is there such a thing as pure altruism?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Is it even possible to give without getting something in return?
It's a question that psychologists have been debating for ages.
Yeah.
Grant highlights this debate between C. Daniel Batson,
Okay.
who believes in true altruism, and Robert Cialdini, who's more skeptical.
Okay.
So Batson argues that empathy can drive us to help simply because we care. Cialdini suggests that even when we're feeling empathetic, we're still motivated by the desire to reduce our own negative feelings.
So it's a complex issue, and there may not be a simple answer.
Right.
But maybe focusing on motives isn't as important as focusing on impact.
I agree.
Yeah.
And ultimately, Grant's point is that even if pure altruism is debatable, focusing on the positive impact for both the giver and the receiver is more productive.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Shifting the focus to the positive impact feels more empowering, too.
For sure.
And it brings us back to John Huntsman Sr.,
Oh, yeah.
the businessman who pledged to give away most of his fortune.
Right.
Huntsman actually believes his giving wasn't just a result of his wealth, but a key driver of his success.
Interesting.
He said his desire to make a difference motivated him to start his own business and build a successful company.
So he credits his giving with his financial success.
Yeah. Are there other examples of that connection between giving and success?
There's research showing that charitable giving is correlated with higher income.
Really?
Yeah. It suggests that generosity might actually boost prosperity.
So it's like a virtuous cycle.
Totally.
Generosity breeds prosperity, which allows for more generosity.
It's a beautiful thing.
It challenges the notion that we have to choose between doing well and doing good.
Absolutely.
And there's a ton of research showing that giving has positive benefits for the giver.
Yeah, like what?
It boosts happiness, reduces stress, improves health, even increases longevity.
It's amazing.
It seems counterintuitive.
It does.
But giving can actually be an act of self-care.
I love that.
So what does all this mean for our listeners?
Yeah.
What are some practical things they can do to be more effective givers or encourage giving in their own networks?
Well, first, I think it's important to be mindful of your own reciprocity style.
Right?
Are you naturally a giver, a taker, or a matcher? Once you understand your tendencies, you can be more strategic about your interactions.
Right. Like if you're a natural giver, you might need to set some boundaries so you don't get taken advantage of.
Exactly.
And if you're a taker, you can think about how to be more generous without expecting immediate reciprocation.
Right.
What about matchers?
Yeah.
What's their role in this?
Matchers help maintain balance.
Okay.
They ensure that giving is reciprocated,
Yeah.
preventing givers from burning out.
Right.
We need a mix of all three styles to create a thriving ecosystem of giving.
So it's about recognizing your own style and then thinking about how you can contribute to a more balanced and reciprocal environment.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What are some ways we can encourage giving at the organizational level?
We can create systems that reward and recognize generosity.
Okay.
Think public acknowledgement, maybe even financial incentives. We can also foster a sense of community and shared purpose,
Right.
which encourages people to help one another.
Yeah, think about your own workplace. Are there opportunities to celebrate acts of giving or create initiatives that bring people together around a common goal?
Those are great questions to ask.
This has been so eye-opening.
Yeah.
I'm already thinking about how I can apply these ideas in my own life and work.
Me too.
What stands out to you from this deep dive?
What resonates with me is that giving isn't just about being nice.
Yeah.
It's about being strategic and thoughtful.
Right.
It's about making a difference without sacrificing your well-being.
Right.
And in an increasingly interconnected world,
Yeah.
giving is not just a nice to have. It's crucial for both personal and collective success.
Yeah, it really is a powerful shift in perspective.
It is.
It's like, in a way, giving is an investment. An investment in ourselves, in our relationships, and in the success of our communities.
I like that a lot.
And speaking of investments,
Yeah?
Grant shares a story about this consulting firm
Okay.
that's trying to land this big project with a company that was known for being skeptical of consultants.
Right.
I can relate to that.
Yeah?
Consultants don't always have the best reputation.
No.
It can be hard to build trust when people assume you're just there to take their money.
For sure.
So this firm, led by this guy, Philippe,
Okay.
had submitted proposals before, and they were always rejected. The company just didn't trust them.
Yeah.
But Philippe was a giver at heart
Okay.
and genuinely wanted to help this company succeed.
So this sounds like a tough situation.
It does. What kind of approach did he take?
So they brainstormed ways to prove their trustworthiness.
Okay.
And they came up with this really bold move
Okay.
in their final proposal.
Yeah.
They included a clause stating that if the company wasn't happy with their work, they wouldn't have to pay.
Wow, that's a huge risk.
I know, right?
It really demonstrates their commitment to the client's success.
It did, and it worked.
Wow.
The company was so impressed by their willingness to put the client's interests first
Yeah.
that they awarded them the project.
That's amazing.
And the firm ended up exceeding expectations,
Good for them.
solidifying their reputation as trustworthy givers.
It's a great example of how going above and beyond,
Yeah,
even when it feels risky, can pay off in the long run.
absolutely.
That's an incredible story. It shows how generosity can be such a powerful differentiator in a competitive market.
It sets you apart.
It's not just about being competent.
Right.
It's about demonstrating your genuine commitment to the other party's success.
Exactly.
This idea of putting the other person's interests first is a recurring theme in the book.
It is.
Successful givers are often otherish.
Right.
They care about their success, but they also genuinely want to see others succeed.
It's not a zero-sum game.
It's not about being a martyr
Right.
or sacrificing your ambitions, but finding that win-win where everyone benefits.
I love that.
It's interesting to think about how we can cultivate that otherish mindset.
It is. Grant highlights some fascinating research on the name similarity effect.
Name similarity effect.
Yeah. It turns out we're more likely to help people who share our names,
Really?
even if we don't know them personally.
So if my name was Adam, I'd be more likely to help another Adam.
Exactly.
That's wild.
It's a subconscious bias.
Wow.
But it's been demonstrated in numerous studies,
Huh.
and it even extends beyond names.
Oh, really?
We're more likely to connect with people who share our birthdays or hometowns or hobbies.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like we're drawn to people who reflect ourselves back to us in some way.
Fatally.
So what does that tell us about giving?
I think it has implications for creating a culture of giving.
Okay.
If we highlight commonalities between people,
Uh-huh.
even subtle ones, it can make them more likely to help one another.
So it's about finding those points of connection.
Right.
Those shared experiences
Yeah,
that can spark a sense of unity and generosity.
exactly.
It reminds me of the power of storytelling. How sharing our personal stories can create bonds and foster empathy.
It's a powerful tool.
Grant also talks about how even small acts of kindness can have this ripple effect.
Oh yeah, I love that part.
He shares a story of a woman who started leaving smile cards around her office.
Smile cards.
Yeah, little notes with positive messages or simple acts of generosity.
That's so cool.
I love the simplicity of it.
Me too.
It's like a random act of kindness with a little extra intentionality.
Exactly.
And this woman's actions inspired others to do the same.
Awesome.
Soon the whole office was buzzing with these small acts of generosity.
Wow.
Creating a more positive and supportive work environment.
That's the ripple effect in action.
It's like once you plant that seed of giver, it can spread and grow in unexpected ways.
I love that analogy.
It makes me think about how we can all be catalysts for positive change in our own spheres of influence.
Absolutely.
I think that's what Grant is trying to convey in this book.
What's that?
Giving, when done strategically and authentically, can be a powerful force for positive change in our lives and the world.
I think you nailed it.
This deep dive has been so insightful. I'm feeling inspired to re-examine my own approach to giving.
Yeah.
And look for opportunities to create a more generous and supportive environment around me.
Me too.
What about you?
What are you taking away from this exploration of give and take?
What I find most compelling is that giving isn't just about altruism or self-sacrifice.
Right.
It's about recognizing that our own success is deeply intertwined with the success of others.
I agree.
It's about finding ways to contribute, to collaborate, and to support each other in meaningful ways.
Beautifully said.
Well, listeners, we hope this deep dive into give and take has given you some food for thought.
Yeah.
Maybe it's inspired you to rethink your own approach to giving.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's sparked some ideas for creating a more generous and supportive environment in your own life.
It's all about those ripples.
Whatever your takeaway,
Yeah.
we encourage you to explore these ideas further.
Absolutely.
And remember, even small acts of generosity can make a big difference.
Couldn't agree more.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time,
Yeah.
keep exploring
Keep learning.
and keep giving.